All right. Tonight is going to be a very special episode because I have finally reached my conclusion on Dr. Ammon Hillman. I'm calling you out directly, respectfully, but directly. What I think about Dr. Ammon Hillman is he is extremely controversial with a very obscure interpretation of Jesus Christ and many other things that I actually agree with. However, where I think you're wrong, Dr. Amon Hillman, and I say this respectfully because I definitely respect the fact that you are a renowned classicist. And what I think you actually bring to the table is insight to the ancient world that a lot of people needed to see. And I think that you deliver that beautifully. Beautifully. It's obscure. It's everything that I love. It's controversial. It's chaotic. Your persona, perfect. However, I think that you have taken this idea and have given a wrong image of who Jesus Christ actually was. And I don't say this as like your typical Christian. I don't even consider myself to be a typical Christian. I fall more in line with like Valentinian or even Sethian Gnosticism. I really like those ideas. Not exclusively. Um, I don't. I'm more. I'm just an all around mystic. I I got a lot of inspiration from watching uh Gnostic Informant. In fact, like the name that I use is Gnostic Pope. It was semi inspired by him, but it was a kind of a name that was bestowed upon me by my TikTok following. I don't have a huge YouTube following. I never really took YouTube too serious because I did very well on TikTok. My main account is right around 400,000 followers, give or take. However, my main account is currently banned because I got hacked by a guy in Turkey. Uh, so right now that account's gone, but I do have my backup account, which is about 83,000 followers. But either way, uh, the point of this is to not call you out and to make you look bad or to like do what a lot of these other internet Christians are doing, just discrediting you but refusing to debate you. I want to take you up on the offer. I want to debate you in a respectful manner. My stance is that I don't disagree with your perspective of the ancient world. In fact, I find it very informative and very confirmation. That doesn't make any sense. It's a lot of confirmation for how I viewed the ancient world. In fact, I actually have a journal that I received a message from God, if you will, that was very obscure, and I wasn't sure how to share it. However, it falls in line with a lot of the things that you have said regarding the ancient world, the ancient mystery traditions, and the things that Jesus was walking around and had going on. I agree that the ancient world had a lot going on that most Christians don't know about today. And they don't know about it, and they refuse to listen to what you have to say. Now, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt because you're kind of out there, bud. Like nothing but love for you. I know how it goes. Like I that's how I was able to develop a following on TikTok. Um, But what I would absolutely love, and I've reached out to, well, I've tried to find a contact and like some contact information directly for you. You're a hard man to get a hold of. I've reached out to Danny Jones. I've reached out to Gnostic Informant, and so this is my way of just showing where I stand, so you can get a feel for where I'm at in my position, and if you're willing to have a conversation with me. Call it a debate, call it a whatever. What I disagree with is just a couple things. Like, I think that Jesus was not involved in all of the substances, and especially definitely not involved in the, you know, illicit things that you mentioned regarding children. I think it's in fact the opposite. I think that he was combating those things because that's where it falls in line. Is that I had a pretty good understanding of the ancient world and what he was dealing with at that time. And if we utilize scripture, even in its original tongue, I don't know it as good as you do. I will give you that. As a classicist and fluently being able to read Greek, this is something that I'm learning myself. And let me give you my credentials too. I have a seminary PhD in religious studies. And so I'm not like bound to some biblical doctrine. I'm not bound to some denomination. I'm not bound to some school or institute. The seminary that I attended is very much interfaith and very much like open minded. And I wrote my entire dissertation to get my PhD on the Greek word uni and what it meant inside of the Bible anytime that Jesus himself used it. What I think really changes the game here is the fact that I wholeheartedly believe with all of my heart that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene, and this is explained thoroughly inside of the book of John, more specifically chapter 2 at the wedding of Cana. I think the Greek reveals this information between the word uni and also the word metzer. Don't crucify me for if I'm mispronouncing these. So, how does this seem relevant to you? Because the things that was going on in that time period is what Jesus was trying to combat to an extent. However, Jesus was a genius. So, what I think was going on here is that you're really tied up on no one's been able to answer why Jesus was found in a garden at 4 a.m. with a naked boy. Ironically, I made a video about this. Well, not specifically this, but like, uh, I incorporate a lot of my sense of humor into my videos on TikTok and the things that, this one video in particular, I talk about metaphysical things. I talk about things that are like, what, and then I try to like make it lighthearted and fun, right? So one of the things that I made a video about was joking around saying, so I did a past life regression recently, and I found out what character in the Bible I was in a past life. And the character that I chose to pick was the naked boy inside of, you know, Gethsemane. Because it's a very strange story, and like not even a lot of Christians seem to know that it's there because, of course, a lot of mainstream Christians don't actually like to read their Bible. Uh, However, this was always a story that stuck out to me. And obviously it stuck out to you too. So we have this in common. And uh, I think I have an answer for you. Given the alternative history that I've come up with, I didn't write a lot of this stuff in my dissertation, but it's a lot of stuff that I've like kept notes of and that was kind of built off of my dissertation. So this timeline, I think that you'll appreciate it, and I would. This is why I want to have a conversation with you so bad to see what you think about certain Greek words and their context and what it could actually mean. So my dissertation is that Jesus was actually married, and even though I have a personal like faith inside of like the Gnostic Gospels or Gnosticism, early Christianity, in the first early centuries, uh, I don't want that to be the fallback because where scholars seem to criticize this is they jump straight into, oh, those are non-canonical, so just disregard them, just don't even care about them. So my goal was to actually find evidence within the canonical Bible itself in the original tongue to find that evidence that Jesus was married. And that evidence happens to lie right in the Greek word uni and the Greek word mater or meter or however it's pronounced. I apologize. But mater means mother, but it can be used in a multitude of ways depending on the context. And then also, the word uni means woman or wife. However, due to tradition and whatever reason, I'm not claiming conspiracy or anything like that. What I am claiming is a heavily overlooked situation inside of the Bible that most scholars have just disregarded because there is this preconceived notion that like Jesus could just never have been married. That's ridiculous, right? Like, oh God, if Jesus ever got married and maybe had children, whatever. But let me break the ice by pointing out my a brief explanation of my evidence that it was actually him being married. Because when we use critical thinking skills, and this is what got me my PhD, was doing this original research. No one else has really put this together, to my knowledge. So to me, it's original research. If there's someone else out there that discovered the same thing, then kudos. I did not get it from you, but still, very much respect to you because it makes everything make sense. It starts to make all these things that we have questions about, which I think has fueled your passion for your belief with Jesus and this storyline, this alternative storyline that you've come up with. I'm not here to condemn you. I'm here to have a conversation with you if you're willing to do it. I'm not looking for clout. I'm not looking for anything like that. I'm doing just fine on my own. I'm just really fascinated by you as a person. I know that now that you and Gnostic Informant are not necessarily speaking. I don't know any details, so I'm not going to go into it. That's between you two. If it's true, if it's not, whatever. However, um, let's talk about the wedding at Cana. Using critical thinking skills, the author that wrote the book of John highlighted the specific wedding ceremony for a reason. So it's not that it's just random, and the scholars have made the focus being where, oh, this is where he made the miracle of the wine. Well, that kind of proves my point even more. Is why did Mary, this Mary character in John, have so much authority? So I did some research. The only people that would have had authority, it's not like Mary, his mother, and Jesus just and Jesus' friends just show up to this random wedding and then they also happen to have authority at a Jewish wedding. That's not normal. So obviously there's an issue here. So I need to get to the bottom of it. So it's like, who normally has authority at a wedding? They had to have been someone semi-important to this wedding to have that type of authority to be like, oh, hey, they're out of wine. Jesus, do your thing. Right? So the person in Jewish tradition in antiquity, based on my knowledge, is that the wife would have that type of authority, and the man oversaw the wine and all that stuff. Me and Dan McClellan actually went back and forth on this subject on TikTok. So me and you actually have a mutual person that has tried to criticize us and like refuses to respond or whatever. Give us an opportunity to actually like have a discourse about this because he has to stick to a strict curriculum. Also, he doesn't want to talk about the time a little over a year ago that he got arrested and for, whatever. We won't go too much into that. We're not going to make this about bashing Dan McClellan. I respect the work that Dan McClellan's done, whatever. But yeah, we've had multiple encounters of criticism from Dan McClellan on TikTok, where he just ended up being wrong and refused to respond to my responses. He made his little pure and utter nonsense claims and whatever. And I know Gnostic Informant can relate to this as well. But yeah, but either way, point being is that when I made my video, I was very excited about it because I found that evidence that I was looking for. And it was criticized by Dan, and I needed to prove myself. I needed to prove where I was coming from, and I think I did a very good job at responding. Never got a response from him, of course. However, the wedding scenario only makes sense if it was his wedding, because why, like him turning water into wine is, in my opinion, symbolic anyways. Like whether it literally happened or not, like that's not like the highlight of the story. So let's get into the Greek words uni and the Greek word mater. Obviously, mater means mother, and in classical context of Greek, it is used in that context. It's used for a son to address his mother. But where it gets weird is where Jesus uses the word uni, or the author that's speaking about the scenario chooses to use the word uni when Jesus says, "Woman, what is this to you? Like, it's not yet my time," or whatever he says. So, why is the word uni being used here? That's not a way that a son would address his mother. He wouldn't call her one, that'd be disrespectful, and he definitely wouldn't be calling her a wife because that'd be weird, right? I mean, it's probably not weird for you, Dr. Almond, because you have this very weird perception about who Jesus actually was. So, like, in your mind, maybe, I don't know. This is why we need to have a discussion because I want to get your thoughts on this. But, uh, I think that he was speaking to his wife because there's more evidence that point, like if we go back into Proverbs chapter 3, Proverbs chapter 8, Proverbs chapter 9, the Song of Solomon, the all of the different wisdom uh context, or the wisdom text, the wisdom traditions and stuff like that. Jesus himself even refers to wisdom in Luke 7:35. Sophia, the Greek word Sophia, refers to her as a her. This is what sold me on the Gnostic idea because they were the ones that were perpetuating this, right? And then even in Matthew, it talks like Jesus says this almost verbatim the same thing. Sophia is used again exclusively as a her archetype, and then we have Proverbs and we have all this different traditions, Kabbalistic traditions, and everything else that talks about Hokmah, yada yada. So it makes sense that this would be Jesus's wedding, and it's not some like heretical or blasphemy situation that Jesus was like a dude that got married. Like it's not an issue. I don't see why it's an issue with these people. It's an argument from silence when people say that Jesus was not married because the Bible doesn't say that he was married. Well, I'm providing the evidence inside of the canonical gospel without having to even go to the Gnostic gospels. You can use the Bible itself to literally look at the evidence and see where it made more sense why not only does it make sense that Jesus was married, but even early Christianity or Christian sects in the first, second, third centuries and stuff like that, why it was a normal thing for certain groups of Christians to think that Jesus was married. Through oral tradition and written tradition, they assumed that he was married. It just made sense with the scripture and with the oral tradition that was passed down. So let's get into it. The word uni, meaning woman or wife, in classical Greek, it was used in direct address, often in a formal or sometimes even a slightly condescending or authoritative tone, depending on the context. Below are some notable examples from classical literature. From Homer's Odyssey, 23:166, 8th century BCE. Homer, after Odysseus finally reveals himself to Penelope, which is his wife, she hesitates to believe him. Odysseus responds, and I can't read Greek, however, "Woman, your heart is indeed harder than stone." Uni, using the word uni to refer to his wife. And the tone here is affectionate, but also slightly rebuking, emphasizing Penelope's hesitation despite all Odysseus has endured. Then let's go down a little bit further in my notes. So like here's some examples that I found where it was like, because the way that I read it when Jesus used it in John chapter 2 is like a playful manner of like similar to how we would call our baby mama, right? Like because the word mater is also used here, which is mother, and then it's automatically assumed that we're talking about Jesus's mother, Mary. However, the evidence suggests otherwise. So these are examples where it's used to address a wife. The word uni is used to address a wife in a manner similar to Jesus's use. A direct, formal, yet not necessarily disrespectful address. Below are a few. Now, put yourself in this scenario, right? Think about this for a second. Everyone's at the wedding. Everyone's having a good time. Everyone might be, we got this Bacchic idea of Jesus being like an incarnation of Bacchus or Dionysus. I don't reject this idea, by the way. Uh, so Jesus is literally like in control of the wine, which is like a Bacchic idea, right? Like, I don't think that it was like a stolen mythology. I think that Jesus was like an incarnation of Bacchus in a way, right? So the wine's flowing, everyone's having a good time, wedding celebration at his wedding. Or let's not even put that in your head yet. Like, just the wine's flowing, and then all of a sudden this Mary character comes up to Jesus and is like, "Yo, Jesus, like, everyone's trying to have a good time. We're out of wine though. Do your thing," basically. And Jesus is like, "Woman, come on. Like, I'm celebrating with the boys here. Like, I'm having a good time. Like, right now's not a good time." Like, I'm kind of lit off the mead here, or not mead but wine. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of like what we're seeing happen in this scenario. It's a wedding scene, and they have authority at this wedding. Just gonna throw that out there. And that's the context that's being used here. It's like it's a celebration. It's a celebratory thing, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's like there's nothing blasphemous about getting married. I'm sorry, Christians, but if you think that Jesus wasn't married, just like prove it then, because I can't unsee it at this point. Anyways, let's continue. So again, when Odysseus, in Homer's depiction of Odysseus referring to his wife Penelope, uses the word "unai," which is the same exact identical word that's used inside of the New Testament when Jesus addresses this Mary character. This is the same way that Odysseus addresses his wife Penelope, his wife, because the word literally means wife or woman, but usually like a married woman. Speaking of celebrating, this is just soda. YouTube. Um, Sophocles, Tricani, uh, where he addresses his wife as Unai. What have you done to my soul? The phrase is structured similar to Jesus's uni. In John 2:4, the tone is one of distress and questioning rather than affectionate. Yada yada. Uh, Euripides is also an example where uh, in Alcestis 373, which is 5th century BCE, uh, Amidus speaks to Excelstus, his dying wife. And the quote here is Unai, as in woman, is it truly decided? Are you leaving me? So we see a man addressing his wife, even in the tone or rendered as woman, where he's still even speaking to his wife in the same manner. Xenophon, uni, woman, have you not learned anything from the work? But this is Ischomachus speaks to his wife about managing the household efficiently. So these are different examples of where in classical Greek that the word uni is being used in this manner. Uh, and then now let's get into Mater, or Meter, however you want to pronounce it. Please don't crucify me, Dr. Amon Hillman. So Mater, meaning mother, is sometimes used by husbands to refer to their wives, particularly when emphasizing their role as the mother of their children. While it doesn't have a perfect equivalent to the modern phrase baby mama, some instances suggest a playful, affectionate, or even teasing use of the term, similar to baby mama, how we use it today. Where, like, when I speak to my wife, sometimes I call her baby mama. It's playful, and, like, the, the main thing that I want to get just on a side note, is that the ancient world is very similar to the modern world in a way. The Greek were extremely intelligent, but they had this playful side too. Like they weren't just strict nerds about everything. Like they talked to their wives in a playful manner, and they had somewhat, well, I don't want to say slang term, but yeah, they kind of had slang terms. Um, so let's look at some examples of this, where Aristophanes uses in this comedy. It was used in comedy, in Greek comedy. Ecclesiastes say, sorry, like I said, kudos to you, Dr. Amon Hillman, because classical Greek, Greek in general, really hard. I'm much better when it comes to biblical Hebrew and Kabbalah and like deeper interpretation of like the Hebrew letters and stuff like that. Greek has been a an absolute pain in the ass. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's been an absolute pain in the ass. But, however, I'm trying to learn. Maybe I'll take you up on an offer on taking some of your classes, your Greek classes, so I can learn a little bit more. But we'll talk about that if we have a conversation. That's when, yeah, that's what we'll do. If you can have this conversation with me and you can convince me to abandon my ideas, then maybe I'll take you up on your course. If not, then I'll just continue with the self taught and not be anywhere near as good as you. I, I tip my hat to you, sir. Anyways, and I'm not an ass kisser, by the way. I'm not kissing your ass. I just got a lot of respect for you because I know how hard it is through personal experience to learn classical Greek, biblical Greek, Koine Greek, whatever Greek. Greek is hard. It's fucking hard. So I tip my hat to you. I'm not an ass kisser, but lots of respect, dude. Um, in this comedy, a husband playfully refers to his wife as mater in a humorous way reflecting domestic life, where the quote says, "Come now, mother of us all, what should we do?" The tone is this is a satirical and exaggerated way of addressing his wife, playing on the idea that she dominates the household like a mother ruling over children. The humor here parallels the light-hearted way some men today call their partners baby mama in a teasing, affectionate way. So again, this is all in the context of John chapter 2, where this Mary character, Miriam, is being addressed by Jesus, where the words that are used here is mater and uni or uni or whatever. Uh, and there is a severe argument from silence that they just assume that this is Jesus's like birth mother, and that this the highlight of this situation is when he turned water into wine. Cool. Like, I'm not, reducing that. Like, it's still a miracle and all that good stuff. However, it's a total argument from silence with a huge lack of evidence to prove that this is actually in fact his mother, and there's a lot more evidence to suggest that this was actually a wife scenario given the fact of those two words being uni and being mater, because it can be used, and especially uni like is never found in classical Greek whatsoever for a son to address his mother. It's not found, it doesn't exist. Mater is obviously, that's where people get hung up on it or whatever, but that's where it means mother. However, there is clear examples, and I can go through other ones. Menander from Samia, uh, you're already become a mother, but to me, you're still my wife. Like, that's a quote directly from Menander, where he deliberately uses it as you become a mother, but you're my wife. Now, some of these might be a little bit of a stretch, but the point here is to not drift too far away from the original point. The original point is that there's more evidence to suggest where husbands are using mater to address their wives in classical context, making more evidence to support my claim that uni is in reference to Jesus' wife, being Mary Magdalene. So, and then we've got Xenophon as another example. We've got Plautus, the Roman adaptation, adaptation. We've got, uh, yeah, like obviously they weren't saying baby mama because that didn't exist, but this was kind of the playful way that they used it in that time period. Um, so to me, it only makes sense that this is a wedding scenario for Jesus, for Mary Magdalene, and then that starts the mission. It would have made sense with that time period, given the fact that he was referred to as rabbi. If he wanted to be taken serious by any of the rabbis, then he needed to be married at that age and everything else. So there's just a lot of evidence that points towards that. Um, Let me scroll through my notes real quick. I wish I had some like music because there's another point that I wanted to bring up. Okay, so what does this mean exactly in reference to whether or not he was? So we know from like James 1:27 that he their whole thing was about combating against whatchamacallit, like taking care of widows and orphans, right? So there was this impending battle that was coming on. He was warning about the siege in 70 AD. He was warning about all these things to come. That within that generation they would see all these things come to pass. That's what all the Bible rhetoric is talking about. So a little bit preterist, but not full preterist, but like still like it brings truth, right? So you get all this rhetoric that is like against the idea of pharmakia, pharmacos, and you had the government at the time that was using these things like the scapegoat ritual to convince people to basically do things against their will in order, like ancient eugenics and stuff like that. So like lived in a world where like you claim that these ancient drugs did exist. Like they absolutely exist. No one's denying that. But was Jesus actually partaking it? Why did this happen with this boy in Gethsemane? It's this mystery. Well, I think I might have an answer for you on the young boy in Gethsemane. I don't think that he was doing those things to that boy. I think that he may have actually been set up. And that's the next point that I want to bring up is let me scroll down in my notes real quick. Do 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 doody 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 doody. I had a really good point for this, and I should have had my notes a little bit better prepared. I don't know if you can hear my dryer in the background. Um, but anyways, well, I'm just gonna wing it. I've got a pretty good idea of it. I can go back in my notes and because I had some good stuff in there. But either way, I can just wing it. Uh, Basically, like, why would he be set up at this point? Well, we know that he was being set up in general because that's the normal story where Judas is setting him up for, he receives 30 shekels of silver and he's basically being set up. So I think what was happening is the second temple was actually being uh, exposed for doing these things. And I've even heard you have conversations and episodes actually talking about this. And that's the wildest thing is before I discovered your channel, before I saw Gnostic Informant even like touching base on these things, or you guys having this conversation, like it's like you had this same exact epiphany that I had that I got intuitively a year before I ever knew you even existed. So it's something that I've been trying to tell people that the Second Temple, the Herodian dynasty, what was going on in the temple was like not the greatest situation. It was pure debauchery going on in there. Um, and I think that Jesus was the byproduct of something terrible happening to Mary, his actual mother, and everything. And then he found out what was happening at the temple, and he wanted to basically expose it. And that's where we get into the symbolism of the dove selling like it's very irrational for Jesus to be this love, kindness type of Messiah to then just all of a sudden out of nowhere go into the temple courts and just start flipping tables, like literally crashing out over them selling doves. It's like I understand being upset about that, but like put yourself in that scenario. Like it kind of reintroduces this new side of Jesus that we don't really we're not familiar with at this point. And it's like all of a sudden he's just crashing out and over them selling doves. Like it's very irrational if you think about it. You know, like there's like and then it gets turned into this like, oh, it's the fact that they were selling and profiting in general inside of the temple and all this stuff. And it's like, no, I'm not buying that. Like I'm not buying it. Just still doesn't, because like that's happening to this day, and you know, no Christians are doing anything about that other than feeding into it, you know, because all of these places have turned to a place of profit. We're like, we're all aware of that. You know, we don't have to get all teenage angsty about it. So why was Jesus actually flipping out? So it's like when I had these questions growing up, Christian and stuff, I could never get a straight answer. So this is what inspired me to dig a little bit deeper, dive into the esoteric symbolism, and to figure out what is actually going on here. Why would Jesus be so enraged at this? To the point that he was willing to risk it all. That he's just like, you know what, this is sick and corrupted and disgusting. I think that he saw that the human trafficking and all this stuff was happening inside of the temple because that's what doves represented. It was a symbolic language. And that's another thing with the Gnostics, like the demiurgos or the demiurge. It meant magistrate. What they did was speak in code. They spoke in code because of fear of persecution. They didn't want to be persecuted. They didn't want to be crucified. They like it was a very tight regime back then. And it was brutal. You and I both know this. Like the world they lived in was a complete drastic change compared to what we're used to today or what you're told in church. So this kind of brings light to Jesus doing this in the temple. Like, why would he start flipping tables? Because he basically was accusing them of, you know, child trafficking, human trafficking, and all this other stuff. It's the only thing that makes sense. Why do we know? Because the word doves being used there. We know that it's tied to Artemis or to Aphrodite or even Asherah. What I think Jesus was doing was due to Luke 7:35 and the other verse in Matthew that I can't remember off the top of my head. I think that what he was doing was bringing back the religion of the ancient Israelites and the Canaanites and everything else, not the one that fell into idolatry, started like sacrificing children into Moloch. They split and became the temple of Jerusalem. I think that what Jesus was doing was trying to get them back into a unified thing of a balanced worship of the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, Yahweh, whatever you want to call them, and Asherah. I think that he understood the wisdom traditions and was trying to bring this back because he knew that Israel would never be back in perfect union until it got back to the religion of the ancients or their ancestors and everything else, when Asherah was worshipped alongside of Yahweh. So this was obviously controversial to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were pushing a strict monotheistic faith. And then on top of that, you have the Romans, who ultimately didn't care about what the Jews were doing at this time period, as long as they were just doing their jobs, keeping order and yada yada, whatever, whatever. However, you had this like collusion going on, like where the Romans and the Jewish hierarchy or priesthood was kind of colluding with one another, and Jesus was calling out their corruption. You know, like why else would he be mad? And then he walks into the temple, starts flipping tables because they're selling doves. I think he was calling them out, saying, "Hey, like you selling children and doing these awful things to children is not a good thing. Like it's not good. It's terrible. I'm gonna like, why are you doing this?" And called him out for it. And this is what led to him being crucified. It's very similar to today, how, like, basically you've got human trafficking that's a major issue. It's a huge talking point right now, but it's still a very big issue even to this day, right? Because I think that the ancient trade routes and the ancient business of human trafficking and child trafficking has continued to live on, very similar to like the Knights Templar tradition, and how like, and they play a major key to this too, because they were excavating out in the Holy Lands and they found a bunch of records that were probably being hidden. And then we start getting into the whole 70 AD thing, right? We get into this idea where in 66 AD that started the siege where the Zealots and the Sicarii basically take over the temple. So now they have access to everything. And then 4 years is a long time. That's like a whole presidential term. You know what I'm saying? Like it feels like a lifetime almost. So they had 4 years to start going through the records, the archives, and everything that's inside of the temple. And they're probably finding some things. They're basically doing an audit, like an ancient audit. And they're figuring out what's going on, who's being sold to what. And obviously, like, Jesus is deceased at this point. However, this is what he was warning towards. This is what he was raising awareness about. This is what I think ultimately got him executed and everything. So, yeah, but it plays a major role in the entire story. Like, they had access to this information. This information caused an uproar, caused an insurrection, if you will. But then when they start doing, it's very similar to what Doge is doing right now to the entire American government, right? Like doing a full audit, and they're like panicking, freaking out. And we all know that America is modeled off of the Roman Empire and how they ran politics and stuff like that. Like, it's not a big deal. It's not a bad thing, because the Romans were really good at keeping records, and they were really good at politics and governing and all that stuff. That's kind of their role throughout history, right? Now, they had some corruption too. However, they were all about protecting their reputation and protecting the Roman state. So if any information came out about them colluding in a criminal manner that would cause some sort of uproar or whatever to cause the citizens to rebel against the Roman Empire, the Roman state, and yada yada, which everyone played along with at the time. They didn't want to risk that, so obviously they stepped in and was like, okay, you're not taking over this temple anymore because you're going to expose everything that we were basically attached to also. Uh, so just whatever. That's, there's a lot of history there. We don't have to go too much into detail about that. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that it doesn't make sense that Jesus was partaking in these different activities that you've accused him of partaking in. I wholeheartedly disagree that he himself was doing to the I mean, maybe the dude was eating some, fungi. Like, maybe he was introducing people, because one point that I do like that you make is that in ancient times the minds were not spiritually evolved or matured to a point where they could fully grasp these really complicated spiritual things that we still don't understand this day. Like, so like, I can kind of get behind you a little bit that maybe he was experimenting. Maybe, I don't know. Like I'm not claiming that he was just entirely sober, but like again, Jesus was married, and it makes sense that he was going around and protecting women and children, because that's what part of his mission was. That's what part, the gospel is. Like, it goes over this extensively. And if we can be wrong about him being married, we could also possibly be wrong that maybe he experimented a little bit, because we know he drank wine too, and he liked to have a good time. I don't know. We'll never truly know. Like, we can only go based on what the text actually says. So your question with Gethsemane is, he was set up. He was set up because he was trying to call these people out for what they were doing. We see this happening even to this day. Like, it's happening to this day, where politicians and stuff like that project their inner insecurities of things that they're actually guilty of on their political opponents. So when you have a religious organization that has this guy that they don't really respect at the time, they don't think that he's the Messiah. They don't care. They literally consider him blasphemous and are forming a coup against him, right? So basically, that's where this young boy of Gethsemane comes into play, because it's kind of ironic how Judas is the guy that sets him up. I even have reason to believe that Peter was helping, assisting set him up out of jealousy and everything. But we don't have to go too deep into that. However, it's just perfect timing that Jesus just so happened, like, it's like he's been going around protecting women and children and getting the attention of the zealots and the Sicarii and all the neighboring people within Judea at the time, uh, around Jerusalem, around Palestine and Israel in general, and like whatever, whatever, right? So it just doesn't make sense that he would be harming children in any way. Like I can't get behind that at all. And like I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I'm not gonna like you're extremely talented when it comes to Greek, but I think that you've allowed this infatuation with the medical side of things to cloud your judgment on like who Jesus actually was. And I think that you've built up a new character about Jesus, and that's fine. We can have a discussion about that. However, I think that Jesus was set up, and I didn't really think about it this way until you made this point. So I accepted the challenge. I was like, okay, I need to really understand and drive a point home where apologetics can't answer it, normie Christianity can't answer it, biblical scholars can't answer it. None of these people can answer it, but I can bring something to the table because I have, again, my PhD is in religious studies. So I don't stick to just some one doctrine. Like, I study it all to the best of my ability. And one of the main things that I've fixated on, and I think that I consider myself to be an expert on, is Gnosticism in early Christianity and the way that they actually interpreted things. And symbolism too, because I one of my other credentials is that for me and you have this in common. I was part of an institution, got expelled due to unorthodox reaction to whatever. However, I was a Freemason for 5 years consecutively. Experienced 42 degrees and across multiple appendant bodies. Took it very seriously. Still take it, like, I still love it. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm a published Masonic author and all of this stuff, right? And all of that is where I think that Gnostic Informant and uh, you, Dr. Amon Hillman, and many others can actually find a lot of missing keys, because that's the point of Freemasonry, in my opinion, in a gist. It's one of the points of Freemasonry is to preserve history and traditions, especially when it comes to the mystery traditions. So I'm very well versed on the mystery traditions. I've experienced initiatic experience of the mysteries, and that's what inspired me to even like pursue learning about them, was through the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry specifically. Um, Now, again, what do I think happened in this scenario with the critical thinking ability that I have? What earned me my PhD and everything else is that I think I have an answer for you after really diving deep into it for the last however long, and I think that the reasonable explanation and logical explanation is that Jesus was set up. Why else would Judas come at that particular time? Why else would the author highlight this boy naked in a loincloth, ancient Greek medical loincloth or whatever the case may be? It just, and then why else would Jesus be sweating bullets and like all this other stuff? Like, I think that you brought something to the table, you brought something to the surface that needed to be addressed, and I think that Jesus was purely set up. That's the entire point of what happened to Jesus in the first place. The conspiracy against Jesus, the Pharisees, the Sadducees going against him, the Romans not really caring that much, just kind of, enforcing, doing their jobs, whatever. Not too worried about it. But you had this Jesus character who was raising a lot of issues for these thugs that were running the temple in the Second Temple period. And he was trying to expose what was happening. So they're like, oh, if you're going to try to expose us, we're going to do everything that we can to slander you, to crucify you, to sentence you to the death penalty in the worst way possible because you're going to get caught as a lay stace. And they set him up to look like a lay stace. They wanted people to think that he was doing what they were actually doing, so the attention would be brought off of them and put on him. Judas set him up, agreed to setting him up because they probably swayed him with 30 shekels of silver. And he was like, okay, whatever. And then you got Peter, who's power hungry, who more than likely went along with it too, but then decided to, at the last minute, have regrets about doing it. Jesus is literally going into a mystical state at this point and seeing who's betraying him, by the way. That's why he calls Peter out. He calls Peter Satan, and he says that you will literally deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. So it's like Jesus was going into like this trance-like state to see who was betraying him. So the mob boss, as you guys like to put him, is he's like seeing like, so who's snitching on me, basically. Like that's the way that I see it. And uh so yeah, it's like, why would it be perfect timing where they're like, okay, we'll work with you. It's like they're informants of the FBI, the ancient FBI, and they're like, we'll work with you. We'll get Jesus set up. We'll make sure that there is a young boy that's there in the moment and everything too, so that way you can actually get him for some sort of crime to be crucified, because that's what they did to lay stasis back then. So that you really, and again, Dr. Amin Hillman, thank you for bringing so much more depth to the word Laistace, because I would have just pictured it as a robber, as a, whatever, as the lexicons like to put it, or whatever. But I never would have thought to actually tie it to, like, I knew that pirates were in the Bible. I knew that ancient pirates were like a thing, due to my other exploration of studies and stuff like that. However, what I think is happening here, to answer your question, is that Jesus, we know throughout even just the mainstream story, Jesus was set up. He was innocent. Even Pontius Pilate thought this, and there was groups of people that was conspiring against him, and it's because of those things that were happening inside of the temple, and he was trying to expose it. Why do I think he was trying to expose it? Because he fits more in line with the ancient Essenes, the Essenian tradition. And as an Essenian, he was tolerant to pagans, to zealots, to Sicarii, to the outlaws, the bandits, the mild lay stasis, not the pirates that were trafficking humans and children and women and children and so on and so forth. I think this answers your question, is that he was set up and then was setting up some sort of whatever. And this young boy, again, we don't know if he was actually like prepubescent or anything like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, like, that word that's used to describe this young boy meant like young man, someone who was, maybe on the younger side, but in the age group of like not like a child. And there's nothing that actually like ties to him doing anything immoral to this child, because it doesn't fit the MO of everything else that Jesus was preaching against. It's like, why would he all of a sudden start doing this weird stuff or whatever? So that's where we disagree, is that he was harming children, that he was this like drug addicted PDF file, as you like to put it. Hard disagree on that, obviously. Does that mean that I think that you're a bad person, or that you're demon possessed, like what's his name? Bob Larson tried to accuse you of? No. Uh, Fun fact: me and Bob Larson were supposed to have a debate at one point about Freemasonry, but it never happened. Um, so there's a lot of like things that we have in common. It's a small world on the internet, but again, the fact that Jesus was married, the fact that Jesus protected women and children, the fact that and I'm saying fact as if whatever, like the evidence, I guess you would say, it leans in favor of this being a reasonable explanation from a Gnostic perspective, or a Christian Gnostic perspective, through an unbiased lens, someone that has, some credentials, that can provide a perspective to maybe help you get to see it too. Or if I'm wrong, that's where I want to have this conversation, is because I'm not looking to debate you in a sense of like, oh, look at me, I got to shut down Ammon Hillman. Like, no, like, I want us, just like you, I am on the pursuit of truth, and I pursued this path because I saw the lies very early on. Like, I saw the lies very early on. And then I came back full circle and I was like, okay, there's obviously still a bunch of lies about you. I want to know the truth, right? And I asked Jesus Christ specifically, guide me to your truth, no matter how much it like questions what I think or what everyone else thinks. I want to know what you think. I want to see the world through your lens, through your perspective, your truth, and I want to help get that truth out there. And then that spirit, that essence has guided me this entire journey, which I thoroughly believe has guided me directly to you specifically. I think that we are supposed to have this conversation to an extent. If it never happens, then so be it. But I just feel really passionate about us having this conversation. If Gnostic Informant is intrigued enough to want to join in on the conversation, and Danny Jones too. Like, even if we set it up and we all meet up at Danny Jones' podcast, I would love the opportunity to just sit down and have a conversation with you guys to see what we can actually come up with together, rather than just one person has the absolute truth and the rest don't, and we all have to listen to one person. No, there's discrepancy, like there's discrepancies in what you say, there's discrepancies in what I say, there's discrepancies in what Gnostic Informant says. But what we can all agree on, all three of us, all four, and Danny included, what we can all agree on is that there's something there. The truth is there. We are so close to it because we're providing answers for people that the vast majority of mainstream Christianity refuses to do. Call it spiritual laziness, call it whatever you want. But what I thoroughly believe, that if we sit down and we have this conversation and we fill in the gaps and come to a final conclusion, I think that we can provide some real truth into the world. I think that we can actually help people to see the truth, and that it's not something that has to be this sensational attempt at, like, you have to listen to us and like we're starting a cult or anything like no. Like, we all have something in common, and that is the pursuit of truth. So this is more of an open invitation if you see this video, and I hope that you do, because I really, really, really want to have this conversation. I can't tell, like, and I'm not coming from a perspective of like you're a bad guy. Like, you are someone who is also looking through the truth, and you are displaying the truth through the lens that you understand it. And I can appreciate that because I've learned so much from you and from what you teach and everything else. It's just that I can't get behind these like few things, these few things. And I also agree, Gnostic Informant, I hate to single you out on this, but like I agree with him too, that you think that the Septuagint predates the Hebrew Bible, like, and the Hebrew tongue and like all that stuff. Like, I understand your points, but like I have to disagree, because there's even the archaeological evidence that was discovered out in Egypt, where Greek was the oldest language until they found the tablet out in Egypt that was written in Paleo Hebrew that actually predates Koine Greek and Classical Greek and everything else by 500 years. I'm just saying. So that there's just a few things, just like two or three things that we disagree on, but that's not enough for me to just completely discredit you and everything else that you brought to light. I can respect and appreciate that. I can respect and appreciate everything that I've learned personally from you. And that's why I want to have a conversation with you. Not only will it be mutually beneficial for myself, you, and anyone else involved, but it'll be mutually beneficial for the rest of the world, because we are so close to uncovering some groundbreaking truth Uh, and we have a lot in common. We have a lot more in common than we don't. So if you're up for the challenge, I'm up for the challenge. I want to debate you in a respectful manner on the simple fact that Jesus is not a PDF file. Jesus more than likely was not a substance abuser. I think that Jesus was everything that he said he was in the Greek, in the English, and everything else in its entirety, and not just these like narrow things that I don't think he was a product of his surrounding. I think that he was like this mob boss character that you like to pick at and stuff like that. I've ironically made similar claims that like or similar allegories, analogies, if you will. I've made the same type of things before, and that's another reason why I want to have this conversation. But basically, he was someone who was utilizing resources is the good word for it. He was a businessman that was utilizing resources at the time, and that's why he mingled with people that were doing these things. He hung out with the criminals, the sinners. He hung out with the bandits and the sinner or the bad people, the whatever. Uh oh, and another example too. They were trying to set him up to look like a lay stace. He even says, "Why are you coming at me as if I was a lay stace?" And then they crucify him. That they put him next to a lay stace, Barnabas, and then crucify him next between two lay staces. They were clearly trying to paint this image of him being a lay stace. But he was making it very clear, like, no, I'm being set up. And then the alternative history gets even wilder from that point because this starts getting into Quranic literature and stuff like that too, where I have this theory. Um, I'll save that for another episode. But this is my video as an open invitation to Dr. Ammon Hillman. I don't think you're wrong about everything. I think that you paint a beautiful picture of what the ancient world actually looked like. No matter how dark it is the truth. And people need to be familiar with that. People need to realize what Jesus was actually dealing with. Jesus wasn't dealing with, good moral people walking around that might not be a Christian and whatever. And then like, oh, you're just a filthy sinner and you need to join my church. Like, no, Jesus wasn't doing that. Jesus was actually dealing with some stuff that needed to be dealt with. Uh, so thank you for all of the amazing work that you have put in for painting this picture and allowing people to see what was actually happening back then. But I gotta at least try to debate you on this subject that Jesus was not a lay stace, Jesus was not a PDF file, Jesus was not someone but he was a mob boss, but more in line with the ancient Essenes, protecting women and children and just utilizing resources and stuff like that because he understood that a lot more people were hurting and dealing with this type of thing because that's the world they lived in. Most of the women were completely traumatized. A lot of the children were completely traumatized because of the things they were exposed to. And Jesus was disgusted by it to the point that he was willing to sacrifice himself, literally, to become an insurrectionist, to give warning about the coming of the siege of Jerusalem for a second time and the destruction of the temple and all that stuff. It's wild stuff, man. But once the smoke settles, the truth is there. So I think that if me and you had this conversation, it'll be very productive. Yeah, that's all I got. But anyways, if you made it this far, thank you. Uh, Even if you're not Dr. Alman Hillman, if you're not Gnostic Informant, if you're not Danny Jones, um, but this is my formal calling out to Dr. Alman Hillman to have this debate. Why was Jesus caught and arrested in the park of Gethsemane at 4 a.m. with a naked boy? I think I've got an answer for you. And if you're willing to take me up on the offer, we can have that discussion. Much love to everybody that watched this. Much love to Dr. Ammon Hillman. Much love to everyone else that I've mentioned in this video. Yeah, let's set it up. Let's set it up. Go. In fact, I'm doing a call to action. If you, again, I don't have much pull on YouTube. Hopefully, my YouTube can grow a little bit more once I start posting more frequently too here. But if you see this video and you happen to be a follower of mine, go over to Dr. Hillman's page, Lady Babylon 666. Go to Gnostic Informant. Go to Danny Jones. Tell them that you want to see this happen. Tell them you want to see this happen. Let them know that Gnostic Pope wants to have a conversation. Gnostic Pope wants to debate Dr. Ammon Hillman. I've gone in the ring. I've gone in the arena with Dan McClellan on TikTok. Both times came out successful. I've gone into the arena with inspiring philosophy over in the TikTok world. I've gone into the arena with many people that underestimated me. I'm willing to go into the arena and take one for the team to go back and forth with Mr. Dr. Ammon Hillman, even though I respect him. And I'll still respect him afterwards, even if I'm proven wrong. But I want to help Dr. Ammon Hillman see the truth just as much as he's helped me to see truth as well. So it's a friendly debate. All right. Love you all. God bless. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Let's see if we can make this happen.